Hello everyone, it's me, Maester Mike again, and I'm back for my next Star Wars review. This time I watched The Attack of the Clones, the second part of the prequel trilogy, sequel to Phantom Menace, obviously, and I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm just going to go in and explain my thoughts on the movie, what it's about, and just what I think of it. So, this is The Attack of the Clones. It follows off 10 years after the events of the Phantom Menace. In it, the Republic is losing a lot of ground with various governing forces in the galaxy who are joining this separatist movement led by a man named Count Dooku, who was once a Jedi, and though he abandoned the Jedi Order some years ago. Padme Amidala is now a senator, and she's under frequent assassination attempts, as we see in the opening film, where she just narrowly escapes one assassination attempt. She hires two Jedi, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, who have returned from some other Jedi mission, and they foil another assassination attempt, and they find that she's being hunted by some mysterious and very dangerous bounty hunter. Obi-Wan and Anakin go their separate ways. Obi-Wan goes off to hunt down and discover who this bounty hunter is and what he's after, while Anakin goes to Naboo with Padme so that they can hide and keep her safe. And on these two adventures, Obi-Wan is realizing that the bounty hunter is a guy named Jango Fett, who we know is the father of Boba Fett, and he's helping this group form a clone army, which the Republic is forming to help combat the Separatists and their growing droid army, while Anakin and Padme are forming a romantic relationship, even though with their two differing backgrounds, they really shouldn't, especially since Anakin, as a Jedi, is not allowed to have romantic relationships. And so, as they try to discover the secrets of this conspiracy and this whole plot, it is setting the grounds for the famous and the infamous Clone Wars, which will help set the stage for the eventual galactic civil war, which we all know and love for the original trilogy. So that's basically the plot of Attack of the Clones. This movie, for those who... A lot of people will say that this movie is the weakest or the worst of the original Star Wars movies done by George Lucas. While a lot of people have hated on The Phantom Menace for a long time, there are others that think that this is the worst. And with The Phantom Menace, I have a very strong connection with that movie, and while I do have a good, strong childhood connection with this movie too, looking back, I do have to kind of agree that this is easily the worst of George Lucas's original films. Although there's definitely some good moments in it, I'm not going to take away from those. It still has a lot of bad moments that kind of hinder this movie. So I think I'm just going to get on with it. With this movie taking place 10 years, they recast Anakin as an older man, played by Hayden Christensen, and yeah, he is not very good. It's unfortunate. I feel like he's not very good. He just comes off as very whiny and temperamental. Like, while I can defend Luke Skywalker and Mark Hamill's portrayal of him in the original trilogy, thinking that I always feel like the complaints of him being too whiny are a little overblown. Unfortunately for this Anakin, I can't really defend him very well. A lot of scenes he comes off as if he's almost about to cry. Really bad direction. And it's not just the acting too, but also the dialogue. There's a lot of really bad dialogue that this movie has. The burgeoning romance between Anakin and Padme, while I understand what George Lucas is trying to go for, he's definitely not one for writing romance. There's just a lot of melodrama, a lot of cheesy acting. I feel like Natalie Portman's a bit better in this movie than she was in The Phantom Menace, but still, I feel like she also comes off fairly weak in this movie too. And there's also some very infamous moments of Anakin that he has. Like, there's that infamous "I don't like sand" exchange. I really wonder what was going through George's head when he was writing that. He's not actually the full screenwriter, so I can't really blame him completely. There's another guy who wrote the script for this movie, but I really wonder what goes through people's heads when they think of lines like that. I understand if I'll play devil's advocate. Sorry for bad talking, I'll play devil's advocate. I know what Anakin's trying to say in that one scene where he first kisses Padme. Like, he's trying to compare and contrast, like, life on Naboo with Padme's life on Naboo, while with his life on Tatooine. He would have much rather lived on Naboo because it's so much more beautiful and more peaceful, and Tatooine's this desolate wasteland with a lot of criminal activity in it. I understand what he's trying to say, but why did he have to go with "I don't like sand"? Also, his weird flirtations where everything here is soft and smooth. Like, how do you even write dialogue that stupid? I don't know. I am trying to write stuff myself, but you really need someone else to really put your foot down and say, no, that's not good. I have my notes here, so I don't go on this for too long. Other bad things, like, this movie is also the longest movie of the original Star Wars movies made by George Lucas. It's about 142 minutes long, and it kind of feels like that because there's a lot of parts in this movie that drag, like the romantic subplot and there's a lot of talk of politics and just how the Republic is losing its ground. While I understand why they're talking about that, they're setting up the world for how the Galactic Empire eventually came to be, but it kind of goes on for a long time, and eventually you just kind of want it to, just feel like you want it to end, although this goes on for too long. Also, well, speaking of politics, I really wonder how, it's kind of funny, I find it funny how Jar Jar Binks became some fairly competent politician in this movie. I'm not gonna, although you could say whatever you want about the whole Darth Jar Jar meme, I don't really know much about that because I haven't really looked into that meme very much, but you could say that you could just joke about him actually being a secret Sith Lord. I don't care about that. That's not something I took any interest in. Also, a lot of people criticize the prequel trilogy for being too heavy on CGI and a lot of green screens. While I think the Phantom Menace, I don't know, aren't there plenty of sets that they use in the Phantom Menace? I think the Phantom Menace looks pretty decent for a film made in 1999, but this Attack of the Clones I don't think really holds up in the visual department. There's just especially nowadays. When I was a kid, I just overlooked the special effects because I love being part of the world, and I just totally bought these environments. But now you can totally see that there's a lot of green screening and just a lot of green screens and no actual sets, and it does have a bit of a disconnect with it. I don't personally mind it that much, but the effects in this movie don't really hold up very well for a lot of moments. Although I think those are my main complaints. Like, the Anakin's not a very good actor, or the romance is definitely cheesy. It goes on a little too long. The movie itself goes on a little too long, and also, what else? The effects aren't very good, but there are still some good moments. Like, I feel like Obi-Wan, played by Ewan McGregor, still. I think he does a lot. He's really good in this movie. He feels like a lot older, a lot more wise. Yeah, if there's one bright spot that anyone pretty much can agree on in this whole trilogy, Ewan McGregor does a pretty good job as Obi-Wan. It does introduce some new characters that I really like. Count Dooku. He's not so much like a full bad guy. I feel like he wants to really try to change things, although he is actually a member of the Sith trying to overthrow the Republic and have the Sith rule the galaxy. I feel like he still has a lot of nuance and depth to him, and he's also played by Christopher Lee, and I don't think Christopher Lee has ever done anything bad in his life. Christopher Lee is an awesome actor, and I'm glad that this movie introduced me to him. He's just great. Although these movies also came out at the same time as the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and he was Saruman in those. So, yeah, had a good time being introduced to him in this movie. And then there's also Jango Fett, who, as I said, is the father of Boba Fett. He's also, I have a personal. Is it kind of hypocritical for me to say that I like Jango Fett more than I like Boba Fett? Although I feel like they also do Jango kind of dirty in this movie. I feel like he's a little bit more competently handled. I don't know. I just have a very soft spot for Jango Fett. Although that may be because of a certain video game that came out a year later. Anyone remember this game, Star Wars Bounty Hunter? Yes, I got this out of my bookshelf just for this video. This game is a big part of my childhood. It was the first game that I had that was rated T, and a very big part of my childhood growing up. I have a very soft spot on that. And Jango Fett is very badass in this game. Even if he isn't that great in this movie, I think I just have a very big soft spot for Jango Fett, especially for the game, but I'm thankful that this movie introduced me to him. There's also still a lot, even if the effects don't really hold up in a lot of areas, there's still a lot of cool locales that this place goes to, like the water, the flooded ocean planet of Camino. I would hate to live there with the constant rain. Like, does the rain ever let up on that planet? Although I live in Washington, so you can say that I already live in Camino. There's also this new desert planet called Geonosis, which, unlike the desert planets that Disney is making nowadays, this actually looks a lot different from Tatooine with like this whole Colosseum and the droid factory. There's some pretty cool locales, and also the spaceship battles in this film are pretty cool. Films, even if the film isn't very good in the acting department or the writing department, I feel the action is still plenty awesome. Like, there's the chase scene between Obi-Wan and Anakin as they chase off this Jango Fett's subordinate, Zam Wesell. I never know how to pronounce her last name. There's this chase throughout Coruscant, and that scene is always very fun. Although I feel like I have a lot more soft spot because I used to have the Lego set of those two vehicles. I wonder if I have some bins underneath my bed. I wonder if I could still find those somewhere. Those are probably my first Lego Star Wars sets, and I have a very soft spot for that scene. Also, the scene with Obi-Wan chasing Jango Fett in the asteroids, that's also really cool, especially with those seismic discharges or whatever, those bombs. Those have a really cool effect, and I did see this movie in theaters. This is the first Star Wars movie in theaters, but I would love to see that again in like an IMAX to hear that sound effect go off. That effect is really awesome with those seismic discharges. And also my favorite moment of this whole scene is the climax, where the Jedi finally show up to help save Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Padme from being executed. Seeing like all these Jedi come out and help support them and fight off against the Separatist army, it's something that you only hinted about in the past 4 movies, and in this movie we actually see all the Jedi come out in action, and it's a really awesome scene. I really love that whole battle sequence. One battle sequence I think is a little off. The scene where Anakin and Padme get lost in the droid factory. I feel like that scene is a little unnecessary. It just kind of comes out of nowhere and just an action scene for the sake of an action scene, it feels like. Kind of, yeah, Jeremy Johns said something like that, I think, and I kind of agree with him. That scene is kind of unnecessary, but it still looks cool, I will admit. And I don't know what most people thought about with Yoda showing up at the end, but I personally really liked that scene where Yoda shows up to fight Darth Sidious, or not Sidious, Count Dooku. Darth Tyrannus is what I meant to say. That's his Darth name. That scene, although I think that lightsaber duel between Dooku and Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Yoda is probably the second weakest. I won't say the weakest, because the weakest lightsaber fight in the George Lucas era was easily the one between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader in A New Hope. I feel like this one is not as impressive as some of the other scenes, some of the other duels have been, but still cool. I really like seeing Yoda actually fight with his own lightsaber. That was a really big part of my childhood. One part I really like about this movie, although Hayden Christensen's acting is not very good throughout most of it, one scene I really like is that one where he goes after his mother, where he tries to save his mother after she was kidnapped by Tusken Raiders in Tatooine. Excuse me. I always felt that scene actually does choke me up when he tries his hardest to save her, but he ends up failing, and then he just turns to the dark side and just slaughters the entire village. I feel like that scene is actually really well done. It's like the only time where Anakin's whiny moments actually really mean something, where it feels more justified. That scene always actually did affect me when I watched it. Although it does lead to probably the worst moment of acting with him, where he is complaining, like, You know the scene where he's talking about, I slaughtered them. I, I killed them. They're dead, every one of them. Not just the men. You know that whole scene where he's complaining about how he killed the Tusken Raiders. That is probably his worst acting moment in the movie. I understand why he's feeling that way, but it's definitely not the best handled. Yeah, this movie is very much of a mixed bag. There's some very strong highlights and there's some very low moments, and that just overall, this movie doesn't really hold up as well as some of the other movies do. Although I'd still probably watch it again. I have fun in the fun moments. It's kind of funny. When I watched these movies when I was a kid, I think even though I don't really care much about acting or effects, I really like getting sucked into these magical worlds. Like, I always loved these kind of movies. Like, I loved watching the Lord of the Rings and the Harry Potter movies growing up too, and I just love the Star Wars movies as well. And I kind of tuned myself out to some of the... It's funny, I don't really think I ever really understood the plots of the prequel trilogy, because there's a lot of politic talks, and I always never really understood those. I think I just tuned myself out and turned off my brain, so to speak, and just waited for the next cool action scene to come on. So, yeah, it's kind of funny how little I seem to have remembered about these films. Well, sort of, in terms of the plot. Yeah, even when I was a kid, I think I knew that Anakin's acting was pretty cheesy. Yeah, I still have fun with this movie, despite some of the bad parts. I kind of lost my train of thought. And hey, if anything that this movie did, it did lead to some of the biggest fan favorite things of the Star Wars: the 2 animated Clone Wars series, the 2003 one done by Ken D. Tartakovsky, and the CGI one in 2008. I really should watch those. I don't know why I never watched them, but hey, now that I'm trying to get back into Star Wars, I think better late than never, especially with there being a final season of an official final season for the Clone Wars. Gosh, I really hope that turns out well. Yeah, even in the weakest of these original Star Wars movies, I still think there's some good stuff to come out of this. Also, it does, the ending, I'm excited to watch The Revenge of the Sith. That was always one of my personal favorites, so I'm going to have fun watching that, wrapping up these original films. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on the Attack of the Clones. It's a big, kind of a mess, but still has some fun moments that I can still watch. So, yeah, those are my thoughts. I'll see you guys later for my next review. So, take care.